Hey, Coach. Man, I got like a half hour worth of questions, but let me just ask you general to give you a chance to talk. The first three quarters, obviously, the level of defense you guys were playing was at a whole other level against a really, really good offense. Can you talk about the energy that it took to defend that offense with that quarterback and the way he runs around, and then conversely, from your viewpoint, what went wrong and what broke down in the fourth quarter, where they were able to put up that 188 yards, and from our viewpoint, obviously everybody looked really, really gassed. But I'd be curious to know your perspective on it all.
Yeah, I think, first off, Coach Malzahn, Coach Norvell, what they do on offense, it's really hard to defend. They do a really good job. They have really good football players, and they get the ball out in space. They run the ball really well. It's almost like triple option football at times where you got to defend the run game, the quarterback, and the option of the perimeter run game off of it, whether it be the reverses or the quick game or, throwing out to the wide receivers in space. It's definitely a challenge to try to slow them down, and they do a really good job. And I thought our guys that first series, we had a mistake early. I think we had them 3rd and 2. We had a communication error, and then we just got to play something top down. If we force the check down, I think they probably get the first down. In that situation, they just don't get the explosive. And I thought our guys responded really well. We held them to a field goal in that first series, and then after that, I think our guys settled down and they kind of blocked out the noise, and they played together really well. And there's definitely opportunities where Florida State just didn't see something, or our guys rallied and we missed the tackle, or our guys made a bigger play. And I thought our guys played really well for those, I think it was 7 or 8 drives in a row. Where maybe later in the game, those breakdowns, whether it was Castellanos or it was one of the wide receivers, or they found it, or the ball was a better throw, or the receiver made a better cut, or the spacing was a little bit better. And some of it was they have really good football players, and they made some really good football plays there at the end of the game. Some of it was just our guys maybe not making the play, or not being detailed enough within the call of taking it away. That the first scoring drive there in the fourth quarter, I think we had them 3rd and 11 off track. We come clean on a simulator, and we feel like we're going to be off the field, and the quarterback makes a play, the running back steps up, makes a good block, and he gets out just for the sticks. Later in that drive, we get them off schedule again. Quarterback starts to scramble around. We come out of coverage, and the area we come out of coverage, they slip a guy in that zone, and they complete a first down pass. It seemed like it at the end of the game. We got them backed up in the last touchdown drive. I think they had a 3rd and 10 backed up coming out, and we come clean on the blitz, and we're not detailed in our landmark. He threw that ball. I thought it was going to be a pick six, and we just got to be a little bit more detailed with some of the where we are field spacing wise, or who we're matching, and what coverage we're in, and how we bottle up the quarterback in some of those situations. And part of it was they made some really good plays, and part of it was a little bit of self-inflicted on us not executing where we maybe did earlier in the game. Sorry, I know that's a lot.
The fatigue factor contributed to that in the fourth quarter?
No, I think I think our strength and conditioning program does an excellent job. I think our sports science program does an unbelievable job of getting our guys prepared and getting our guys ready for the situation. And then I think we have really good depth. I think when you look at it, we're constantly rotating D linemen, constantly rotating linebackers. In the back end, we're playing a lot of different corners, constantly getting different guys on the field. So I think, that situations where we got to get off the field. That one drive is 20 plays. We have opportunities on 3rd down, 4th down. I think they were 3 for 3 on the one series on 4th down. And we had opportunities. We had a missed tackle on a quarterback scramble on 4th and 5. Like I said, backed up 3rd and 10. We had an opportunity to get off the field. We come out of coverage on a 4th down. We had opportunities, but I think our program does a really good job of getting guys prepared for that moment. I think we have really good depth. We have younger guys, and we have some guys that are probably 2s here that may start in other programs that have really valuable reps and minutes. And, I trust those guys just like starters to go out and make the play.
Recording in progress.
Next we'll go to David Lake. David, go ahead. Yeah, Coach, want to ask you about just the safety play in general. Seems like all those guys stepped up and made different types of plays in different types of ways. And then also just the traits. What traits does Keontae Scott have that make him such an effective nickel in your defense?
Yeah, he's a guy that allows it so you don't have to sub. He can play in the box, he can play in space, he can play coverage. He plays man to man on guys really well. He shows the ability to blitz. Um, he does so many different things well, and it allows us just to be more versatile on defense. And then he's a very smart football player. He's played a lot of football. You can tell he's been very well coached. Here and I believe before he came here. And I think that just helps him to have awareness of situational football, awareness of the formation, the situation, the different style of plays that we're seeing. When he can be a little bit more aggressive within the scheme, when he has to be a little bit more careful, and it just allows him to play fast every single week. And he's got that a little bit of veteran savviness to him, where he's always under control. He's always got a really clear head, and he's made some really good football plays for us because of his awareness and his ability.
And then Jacoby and Zechariah, just their performances as well.
Yeah, ZP early, he made a couple really good tackles in space. I think they ran that reverse early after the big play, going down into the red zone, and he comes down, runs the alley, presses the hip, makes a really good tackle. But he showed up all day, whether sometimes it wasn't even something that you normally see, just covering a guy up or making a play or reading the quarterback's eyes or playing at the sticks. I thought he tackled really well in this game and made some really good plays, cleaning things up from the post or when we dropped them down. And then same thing with Jacoby. I think a veteran guy that's played a lot of football. He's played different positions. He's played some nickel, he's played some Sam, he's played some deep safety. And just within our schemes, he's getting better and better every single week. And that's where, some of maybe the miscues that we had in camp or, earlier in the season in those first 2 to 3 games, now those are things that now his awareness level is even better. He's got a better feel for the defense. And I think, between really ZP, Keontae, Jacoby, the linebackers, the corners, their communication is getting better every single week. You can see they're working the better, just with the calls, with the checks, who's helping who in certain situations, and they're getting a better feel for playing together within the scheme every week. And I think that's going to continue to improve. And that's one thing I'm excited about this week with the bye week is improving our communication to another level. Being able to go back through that fourth quarter, and then really there's some plays in the first drive of the game all the way through the game where it's, hey, what did you guys see here? So that way I have a better understanding as a coaching staff. We have a better understanding for some of the different things that we put ourselves in check-wise, or why guys saw certain things a certain way and why we played things out a certain way, just to make sure we continue to grow as a defense and get things cleaned up to another level where, we can play even faster as a unit, series in and series out every week.
Next, we'll go to Adam Lichtenstein. Adam, go ahead.
Hey, Corey. Thank you for doing this today. I'm just going to ask about, I know you preach violence in, your defensive strategy, making sure guys are playing violently. How do you, balance that with, not doing anything where it's going to cost the team penalty-wise? I know Dylan Day had a targeting call. Wesley Bissain took out Michael Irvin on the sidelines, when he was making a tackle and got penalized for that tackle. I guess, how do you strike that balance between playing violently and not making those kind of mistakes?
Yeah, everything's got to be, smart situational football, smart between the whistles. And it's, we want to be an attacking style defense. We don't want to sit back. We don't want to let the offense dictate the tempo. And we've seen very different styles every week, whether, Notre Dame to South Florida to even Florida State. Every week you're going to see something different. Florida was completely different. And for us, it's, being physical from whistle to whistle, playing start to finish. But like you said, the penalties, aggressive penalties, we can coach. Aggressive penalties, we can get that fixed. It's the discipline, the jumping offside or the roughing or diving on a pile. Some of those things we just got to be smarter in those situations. And that was part of our meeting today with the players. That's what we've talked about as a staff. And there's definitely little details we got to get cleaned up. We got a horse collar. It's got to be a pin the knees and a wrap and roll. we get the roughing on the sideline. We got to be smart and know where we are in the field right there. And that's something that we addressed with the defense today, and we will get that cleaned up. But we're going to continue to be a physical football team as we go forward.
And then something I've noticed over the course of the first 5 games is that sometimes you'll like load one side of the defensive line, leave Ruben kind of alone, on one side. What advantages does that give you? What works about that?
Yeah, every week we're going to try to do some different things and give the offensive line and offensive coordinator different pictures. And sometimes it's based off where pressure's coming from. Sometimes it's just based off a line game or a stunt, or it might be based on their offensive line or protections. Every week we're going to try to attack things differently, and it's different ways to contain the quarterback, bottle the pocket, give different presentations, put different things up, let them try to figure out what we're trying to do defensively or schematically. And sometimes it's to isolate some of the different matchups that we want. Maybe on a center, maybe on a guard, or sometimes on a tackle, take away chips. It's different things every week, and it's just different things that we look into when we game plan. Okay, what advantages do we have, and how do we want to try to go about, attacking the offensive side of the football this week?
Let's go back to David Lake. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, you touched on this a little bit, but and I understand like the difficulty and the challenge of dealing with Castellanos as a scrambler, but I am curious how you feel like the defense performed in that facet of the game. In general, like, is there anything you feel like you would have done differently with him as a scrambler and just the challenge he poses in that phase?
Yeah, the number one thing for us was communication. And then we always want to eliminate the explosives. That was a high play, explosive offense. And I can't remember the number right now off the top of my head, how many plays over 25 yards, and then how many runs over 10, how many passes over 16 they had coming in. It was one of the highest numbers I'd seen at this point in the season, going into a game. And we gave up 2 plays over 25 yards in the game. I think on play 3, they hit a wheel out of the backfield on us. And the very last play of the game, he hits a route. We miss 2 tackles. Then we escort him to the sideline. We got to tackle him inbounds. It was a 30-yard gain. Outside of that, that was the only 2 plays all game that we gave up over 25 yards. So that was kind of like the number one deal. We can't give up explosives to this team. Number 2 was, we need to create more big plays on defense than they have on offense. And, for us, that's a TFL, that's a sack, that's an interception, that's a fumble recovery. And I think we created 9 big plays on defense in those areas, where offensively, I think we gave up 8. And it was, runs over 10 yards, passes over 16 yards. So we felt like we created more explosives on defense than we gave up on the day, which against that offense is very difficult to do. And, I felt like we did a really good job controlling that. It was really later in the game. I think he scrambled 9 or 10 times for 57 yards. It was something in that area. I'd have to look back at my notes. And I think we did a good job of, when he did scramble, we pushed the coverage. Or when he did scramble, we plastered. And we stayed on our hats. And, it was scrambles early in the game of 2 yards or 4 yards or 5 yards. And, it forced them, the first drive of the game, he scrambles that first third down in the red zone. We pull him up, they kick the field goal. He had a couple other scrambles on third downs and fourth downs or I think on third down specifically, where, he's got to slide short of the sticks. Or, he gets 7 or 8 yards and we still have him in fourth and off track, and they're forced to punt the football or go for it on fourth down. Later in the game, I think, we brought a boundary pressure. We kind of hit a couple flybys, and we didn't hit the movement where we wanted to. And it got us a little bit out of leverage, and he scrambles for 16. And then, the touchdown later in the game, he scrambles around, we come out of coverage again. There was a fourth down later in the game on a touchdown drive where we come out of coverage. That's where, at that point, we got to stay more detailed. We got to be a little bit more disciplined in those situations, because those became some of those runs over 10, passes over 16, where if we're a little bit more disciplined, we continue to contain that, to runs under 10 yards and force him to throw the ball away. I think now that fourth quarter looks very differently than it did turn out. And that was the biggest thing today in the walkthrough, and, meeting with our guys and showing it to them on the film. It's just our details in those situations. We need to stay consistent for 60 minutes, all the way, play start to finish, all the way through a football game.